BXB. It's in the game!
Let's dive in straight away with this one because I've got quite a lot to talk about here. Beholder is, first and foremost, probably the most stressful game I have ever played. After a few hours play, I was tired, I was irritable, I started to feel like I might be having a heart attack. My head was spinning, and quite frankly, I was having a really bad time. And that's probably the point. This might be a weird one to unpack, but hopefully also this could be interesting, so sit yourself down and let's have a chat about what was a really unpleasant game I played for you. So then, Beholder is one of those really indie games. It even has these silhouette characters with the piercing white eyes, and that's fast becoming the calling card of gloomy, thinky indie stuff. The game is set, well, it's set in 1984, both figuratively and literally. It puts you in charge of a housing tenement in a Soviet-esque dystopia. Now naturally this means you're a government official, and as such your duties mostly comprise snooping on your tenants and thoroughly grassing them up to the authorities if they're up to anything naughty. Along the way you try not to piss them off so much they murder you, you try to earn enough money to keep your eternally needy family alive, you try to keep up with the ever spiralling list of forbidden items and activities, and you generally try to make sense of the horrible, crushing sense of misery and oppression that oozes out of every pore of this awful, awful world. And you have to give the developers their due. This is bleak in a way that few games have ever managed before. I mean honestly, I struggle to think of any game world I would want to live in less than this one. City 17? Doddle. New Vegas? It's a bit of radiation, you'll be fine. But this? Oh hell no. There's an utter hopelessness to this game that is actually quite hard to describe, but which ended up with me feeling legitimately depressed by the end of my first playthrough. I mean, possibly like world events in the last year have meant this kind of theme has a stronger impact on me now than it would have a year or two ago, but oh my. Let's just say this, Beholder may not be the post-Trump and Brexit pick-me-up that you are looking for. But back to the game. Earning money rapidly becomes your primary concern, as various family crises strike, with accompanying bills attached that will have you staring at the screen in disbelief. Because hopelessness. If you ever fail to meet one of the mandatory costs that the game throws at you, it's off to the gulags with you. So in practical terms, you do rapidly become an outright monster, ruthlessly blackmailing and extorting your residents over their every transgression, and then grassing them up to the authorities anyway, just for the extra little cash bonus you get from the government. And then you jealously hoard your ill-gotten gains, hoping and praying that you've squirreled enough away, ready for when the game comes knocking for its next eye-wateringly massive payoff, which you probably won't have done. Because hopelessness, do you see? Now, going into much more detail about the things that happen in this game, it gets kind of spoilery, so obviously I'm going to keep stum. But one thing that is worth mentioning is that there is a genuine narrative here. Stuff happens that has global impact, and your situation does subtly change as the game rolls on. And on your first playthrough, that's a great thing. But considering how easily you can get into a genuinely lost situation, with your entire family needing thousands and thousands to deal with the current emergency, and you flat broke, restarts and replays, they do seem genuinely inevitable. And at that point, the fact that you will basically have to play through the exact same sequence of events every time starts to become a massive kick in the balls from a game that is already stomping on you pretty hard in terms of its theme and tone. Now, I'm not sure exactly how much of a problem I think this is. There does seem to be some branching going on, and so you can always choose a slightly different path through the events on your next run. But even so, the landmarks and milestones are totally unchanged, so the fact that you can take a slightly different path to each one, it's not helping that much, to be honest. Obviously there are good artistic justifications for the way Beholder goes out of its way to make your situation feel unfair, hopeless and overwhelming. A brutal totalitarian state should absolutely feel like this. but you are left with an interesting conflict between the needs of entertainment and artistic intent. To put it simply, this game is not fun. It's not trying to be fun. It shouldn't be trying to be fun. But players need to be aware that they put their money down on this and they are buying a game that is going to try its best to make them feel pretty horrible. And you need to be okay with that, or you probably should keep your money in your pocket. It's really hard to recommend this game to many players, to be honest. I mean, let's say that you're on board with what I'm saying and you're down for a depressing but thought-provoking experience. Well, I'm afraid there is still another issue that I need to cover, and this one's a bit harder to write off as just artistic expression. I said at the start of this review that this game was stressful, and that's not because it's a bit miserable. Everything that is happening in this game happens on a time limit, and whilst these timers are pretty long, you still end up with a lot of balls in the air and all of them feel incredibly important. You have to earn money, so you need to get your snoop on while the tenants are out, but you also have missions, and to complete those you have to catch your tenants when they're home to discuss things with them. You have to get to the black market dealer to buy the odd bit of contraband, to barter with your residents, or to sell any valuables you may have pinched while you were rummaging through someone's knicker drawer. You have to talk to your family and see who's dying this week, and you have to file those reports and profiles to the government, and now the phone's ringing and you have to race to answer it or you'll cop a huge fine. The impression you should be getting from all this is that you are busy in this game. When you hear the initial concept, you tend to imagine that you're going to spend a lot of time just watching things buzz around, watching your tenants, craftily trying to catch them up to something that you can turn to a profit. But the reality is you end up rather frantically clicking like a madman just to try and keep up with anything. And again, that's probably justifiable at an artistic level, and certainly you get a sort of Brazil-esque, hopelessly overworked bureaucrat feel from this. But it means you also come away from a few hours of this game feeling like you've done a hard shift at work. As far as I can see, you really do have to do all these things as well, as all the balls you're juggling have some pretty nasty consequences attached to them waiting to trigger when they hit the floor. It's exhausting, and it's not what I expected at all when I first booted up the game. I think I probably do also have to address the rather influential elephant in the room here. I mean, there's no getting away from how similar in tone, theme, and even its overall structure this game is to Papers, Please. The developers don't shy away from this either, with one of the subquests actually being named Papers, Please, in a pretty direct nod to their game's rather obvious influence over this one. A less charitable reviewer may question whether this game is actually saying anything that wasn't already said, more succinctly and more elegantly, in Papers, Please. There is some truth in that question, and you could argue that the actual gameplay in Papers, Please was a little more appealing than what you're doing here, which at times drifts into kind of annoying point and click territory as you're just ferrying items around and trying to find the thing you need to solve the current problem. But I've rambled on long enough, and it's time to hand out a rating, and I'm really struggling to know where to put this. I'm glad I played it, but I can't imagine I'll ever want to go back to it, and I didn't really have a good time. I mean, a 3 seems harsh because artistically this thing is clever, but a 4 seems over generous for a game that has limited replay value and made me feel kind of ill. I'm going to give it 3 stars because I think for the average player that's about where this should be. But if you're an artsy masochist like me, you can probably imagine an extra stars here.
BXB. It's in the game.